because that's where we all find ourselves today. Not always aware that the presence of the power of God is with us. Because we don't all have experiences of seeing bright lights or hearing voices from clouds. Most of us haven't had either the experience Moses had or the experience Jesus had. We just have the stories. We just have the stories that were their stories. And sometimes we have stories from people in other generations that have had special experiences of God. And quite often, because we don't see it in the same way they saw it, we just assume it isn't there. We just assume that it might have been there at one time, and maybe it still is for certain people today, but we just assume that it's a typical thing. The power of that presence might not really be there. But you know, as a movie line said, in a movie years ago, I can't remember which one it was, there are some things that are true, whether we believe it or not. And the one thing we can bet is true is that the presence of the power of God is always with us. Whether we know it, see it, can recognize it, or not. The presence of the power of God is something that we need to wake up to. And half the time we go through life asleep. The stories from the Bible, the stories from people who have experienced God in special ways, they're stories that are meant to remind us that there is something more than we often see on the surface. They remind us to look a little harder. And if the best we can do is simply to get up each day and act as if we knew that we're true, then we've done an awful lot. Because acting as if something is true is often the very thing that wakes us up to what really is. Or we can act as if something's true in a bad way and end up in a big mess. We can act as if life is just one disaster after another, waiting to happen to us, and that there's really just nothing that we can do about it. We can act as if a chronic illness is something that takes us out of the mainstream of life and makes it impossible to enjoy the rest of our life. And if we act that way, it will be that way. We can act as if the failures we have in our life are the end of the world and that they define us, and say that we're just a failure and a mistake. And if we act that way, as if we believe that's true, you can bet that's exactly what's going to be true for us in our lives. We can act as if life just happens to us. As if we're some kind of ball being batted around with no choices of how to respond. And if we act as if that is true, then we will be battered around till we are black and blue in body and spirit. All of those outcomes are byproducts of acting as if something were true that isn't true at all. That isn't true at all. But if we can trust that when Jesus said there would never be a time that we would be separate from the presence of the power of God, if we can trust it even if we haven't recognized that we've experienced it ourselves, if we can simply trust that somehow, regardless of how they explained it, whether we agree with how they explained it or not, really doesn't matter. Something happened. You don't yourself put yourself in a position that these disciples did to be killed themselves based on something you just made up. You would back off at the last. But they didn't, because something happened. And if we can believe that and trust that even when we don't see it, and if we can begin to just act in our own lives as if that power of the presence of God is available to us in all things, what a difference it will make. What a difference it will make is that if you come to the communion rail and if you act as if it really is true, because it is true, but if you don't believe it, if you act as if at that rail with you is everybody who's ever gone before you, the people in your life that you love that have died, if you act as if they're right there with you receiving communion, if you act as if, in that prayer it says the whole company of heaven is present, if you come to that communion rail and act as if that experience is going to become something for you that's more than just getting out of your pew, going to the rail, getting your piece of bread and a sip of wine and going back home. It will become your experience of God. It will become that power that leaves with you when you leave that place. It will become that light that shines in you and through you. If you approach an illness or a failure or a decision that you have to make in your life as Jesus did, knowing that if you ask, somehow that power of the presence of God will speak to you. And you begin to act as if that were true, noticing the things that happen to you during the week. Noticing the kinds of internal instincts and intuitions that come to you that so often you just put aside and don't pay attention to. But if you tune into it because you know that just might be the power of the presence of God speaking to you, if you do that, all of your life will be changed. Or your illness won't go away. Neither will some of your failures. And neither will some of the tough decisions you have to make. Jesus went to the cross just because he saw the glory of God and knew the power of the presence. God didn't say, okay, now you don't have to do that. He doesn't take it away, but it changes it. It changes it. Because you know that whatever you have to do, whoever you have to be that day, you're not in it alone. That you live and move and have your being in the powerful presence of God. And it will enlighten you. And it will shine in you and through you. Because the glory of God, the power of the presence of God is all around us. Sometimes it may be veiled. Sometimes it may be something we need to step back from the crowd to see. Sometimes we may simply have to trust it's there because somebody else told us. And sometimes we may just have to act as if it were there, whether we feel that way or not. But we can be sure that we are never without the power of the presence of God. Because there is nothing in this world or the next that can separate us from that power of that presence. All we need to do is wake up to it and realize that whether we see him or not, Jesus is indeed here.